In this video tutorial, I'll be teaching you how to make the double helix silver cuff bracelet. We've sped up the video to save on viewing time. This bracelet is really heavy and is made with 10 gauge wire, sterling silver wire from Rio Grande. Even annealed, this is very heavy wire. So that's something to keep in mind if you decide to tackle a project like this for yourself. And the coils were woven together using the flat wearable wire weaver. I'll put a link to that in the top corner of the video. If you'd like to learn more about how to use the wire weaver, please check our recent video, the triple corkscrew copper wire bracelet. So once the two sections are woven together, another piece of 10 gauge straight is put through to lock them together. And 10 gauge is approximately 2.59 millimeters. So again, it is very heavy. So it was annealed after it was woven together. It was annealed prior to coiling. Then it was annealed again. And now I'm pounding it flat, just moving all of the coils in the same direction basically, and laying them down. And again, even annealed, this stuff is really a bear to work with. And I'm putting it through one of the channels in the swage block just to make sure everything is uniform and nice and tight. Tapping it both on the sides and on the front and on the back. So I'm going to fabricate end caps. So how I determine the length of material I need for my end cap is I measured the width of the bracelet, multiplied that by 2, then took the thickness of the bracelet and added it to that number, then rounded it up and determined I needed 36 millimeters of flat sheet. I patterned the silver sheet on a texture plate in the rolling mill. Give the cap more interest than just a plain cap. And I am filing one edge to be really smooth, because then I'm using a divider. The divider was set to the width that I desired for the cap, and then just using the divider to score a line, which I cut with the metal shears. This is 20 gauge sheet material, also purchased from Rio Grande. I have to make sure your edges are flat and flush. If you have difficulty doing this by hand, you might want to pick up a miter vise. We carry miter vices. We carry many of the tools that are used in the video tutorials on our website. Just check the description box below for a link. So filing both edges, because we're going to join those with solder. I'm using a bail making plier. This is a 7mm and 9mm mandrel bail making plier, because my bracelet is more oval shaped It's not really flat and it's not round, but it's more oval shape. I'm using the bail making pliers to form the shape for the cap. And then using flat nose pliers to make sure that seam is true. So when I go to solder, it solders beautifully. I'm using hard solder, and I put the hard solder inside the cap. And the reason I put it inside rather than outside is to keep solder from being visible on the outside, because I have pattern on here. I don't want any excess solder on there that I would have to file off, because then I would have to file off some of the pattern as well. Using a large flat file, just smoothing those edges, those cut edges. And we're going to put a top onto this cap, and using the large flat file to make a nice flat even surface. And I have another little scrap piece from this decorative sheet that I made, and I am using medium solder, and I'm flooding the back side of that piece of sheet with the medium solder, and then putting the end cap on top of that and heating again, and once the solder flows, it will connect those two pieces. I absolutely love watching for the silver line when it goes all the way around, so I've slowed this section down here so you can see the moment the solder begins to flow. It's just an awesome look, and I never get tired of seeing it. So it was quenched and pickled, and I'm trimming off the excess using a metal shear. And using a number 2 file, I'm going to file the edges down and make them flush with the outside edge of the cap. Using a little sanding block, buffing everything. I'm giving a bit of a bevel to the outer edge of the cap, and it just makes for a little more pleasing look rather than a sharp edge. At least that's what I would prefer. And I'm using a strip of 220 grit sandpaper and just going around everything and making sure it's all smooth and free from any sharp edges or burrs. And I took the bracelet over to the bench buffer and polished that end up. And the reason I did that was once the cap is on there, it becomes very difficult to polish down in that end where the bracelet goes underneath the cap. So I did that in advance. And it was cleaned and scrubbed up real well. And popped on to the bracelet, add some Mighty Flux, and I'm just using easy solder at this point, and wire feeding it in, stick soldering it in underneath the cap, flipping the bracelet over and putting the heat on the top side just to make sure all the solder is drawn in. And I have my maker's mark. Since there really wasn't a place to put my maker's mark on the bracelet, I just made a little badge for it, flooded the back side with easy solder, and then sweat soldering it on to the cap on the inside of the bracelet. And that was quenched and pickled, and just filing and using some sandpaper to make sure edges are really nice and smooth on that maker's mark badge. There's no sharp edges, nothing to catch your fingernail on. And of course it still has some light scratches, but go to the bench buffer and we'll remove those with some black compound. So I've done a preliminary polish with black compound on the bench buffer for the entire bracelet. And I'm shaping it, and this was a bear to shape. It is a very, very heavy bracelet. It comes in right around 3 troy ounces. So just to let you know, it is a heavy bracelet. Then it was put into the ultrasonic to blast all the compound out, dipped in liver of sulfur, and then the liver of sulfur was buffed off, leaving bright high spots and dark deep color in the recesses. If you like what we do, please like and subscribe.